What would you do if you were a father coming home after 3 years away, only to have your son tremble and crawl under the bed instead of running into your arms and whisper, "Dad, don't let Mom see me"? What this millionaire father did next made the entire courtroom hold its breath and made America reconsider what it truly means to be a father. Liam gently pushed open the bedroom door. It let out a soft creak, like a sigh. 3 years. 3 years since he'd stepped foot in this room. And now, as he took that first step inside, he felt suspended, caught between past and present. The room was silent. No whir of a fan, no cartoon sounds from the TV, no toys beeping or whirring. Everything still. The bed was neatly made. A stuffed bunny lay perfectly placed beside the pillow. A school backpack hung from the chair, its strap caught on a loose blue thread. One of the boy's socks lay alone on the floor, curled like it had been dropped mid-step. Liam frowned. "Noah!" He called, his voice just loud enough for a child to hear. No answer. He looked around again. The room wasn't big. There weren't many places to hide. But something felt off. That kind of wrong that sends a chill down your spine before your mind can name it. Then he heard it. Faint. Barely there. A sniffle. He knelt down and lifted the edge of the blanket that hung low to the floor. 2 eyes stared back, red and watery. Noah was lying under the bed, face buried in his arm, body curled in tight, his shirt wrinkled, his back dusty from the wooden floorboards. He didn't move when he saw Liam. He just blinked slowly and turned his face away. Liam sank to his knees, voice soft. "Hey, buddy." Noah didn't answer. He pulled himself deeper into the shadow, like the light itself frightened him. His little body trembled barely, but enough. "What are you doing under there?" Liam asked again, doing his best to keep his voice steady. A moment passed before Noah finally spoke. His voice was strained and barely louder than a whisper. "Dad, don't let Mom see." Liam froze. He didn't understand right away. He didn't want to understand. But then Noah turned slightly and extended his hand from the shadows. On his left wrist was a bruise, clear, deep, unmistakable, as if someone had gripped him hard, in anger. Liam stared at the injury, then at his son. His own hand clenched into a fist. "Who did this to you?" Noah didn't answer, but then he murmured, "I'm scared of Mom." Before Liam could ask anything else, the sound of high heels clicked behind him. He turned around. A woman stood in the doorway. Her dark hair was swept up in a neat bun. Her makeup was flawless. Her face beautiful, but cold as stone. Audrey, his ex-wife. She didn't look surprised to see Liam kneeling by the bed. She didn't flinch at the sight of Noah lying there. She just stood still, arms crossed. And then she spoke, her voice light as air. "I thought you said you'd never come back here again." Audrey stepped fully into the room. She closed the door behind her softly, almost too softly, considering the circumstances. There was no shouting, no panic. Every movement she made was deliberate, as if calculated in advance. "Get up, Liam. What are you doing?" Her voice wasn't loud or soft, just steady, laced with a hint of sarcasm. "Or did you think you could just show up here and play the hero?" Liam stood up and turned to face her. Noah was still curled up under the bed, hands covering his head, not moving. "He's scared," Liam said, eyes fixed on Audrey's face. "Can't you see that?" Audrey crossed her arms. Her deep red nails stood out against her white blouse. "Kids are scared of all kinds of things," she replied. "He's been obsessing over some nonsense he saw online. I told him not to go online without asking first. But you know how it is. You weren't around to teach him that." The last line was aimed at him, like a dagger. Liam didn't respond. He knelt down again, lifted the blanket, and reached a hand under the bed. "Noah, can you come out? Daddy's here." After a moment, the boy slowly crawled out, keeping his head down. Liam reached out and gently pulled him close. The child melted into his arms, his body cold, weightless, with the scent of his hair mingled with the dust from beneath the bed. Audrey shrugged and turned away. "He's just acting out for attention. I told you already." Liam knelt on one knee, cradling Noah in his arms. He gently took the boy's wrist and held the bruise up to the light. This didn't come from watching the internet. He didn't bruise himself. Audrey still wouldn't look. Maybe he bumped into a table or fell down the stairs. He runs around without watching where he's going. And he crawled under the bed because he tripped? Liam's voice was low, steady. And he says he's afraid of his mother. Audrey turned back, a faint, cold smile on her lips. "What are you trying to start, Liam? You didn't even bother to check in for 3 years. And now, because you see one bruise, you think you have the right to question me." Liam didn't answer right away. He tightened his hold on Noah's hand. Noah looked up. His eyes were no longer teary, but they were still red, still scared. "Sweetheart, can you tell me?" Liam asked softly, like a breeze. "What happened?" Noah pressed his lips together. He glanced quickly at his mother, a frightened flicker, and then looked away. "It's okay," Liam assured him. "Just tell me. She won't hurt you. I'm right here." Noah lowered his head. His voice was barely a whisper. "Mom locked me in the closet." Liam froze. "How long?" he asked. "How long was he locked up?" "I don't remember," Noah said, shaking his head. His voice grew even smaller. "Usually when Uncle Victor came over, I wasn't allowed out of my room. I couldn't cry. If I did, Mum would get mad." Audrey let out a short laugh. She shook her head, smiling like she'd just heard a bad joke. "He's got a better imagination than I gave him credit for," she muttered, not blinking. Liam looked her straight in the eye. "My son doesn't make things up." "What about me?" Audrey shot back. "You're going to take the word of an 8-year-old over the woman who lived with you for 5 years. "I don't believe you," Liam said, enunciating every word. "I believe the look in that boy's eyes when he said it. And I noticed how you didn't seem the least bit surprised." The room fell silent for several seconds. Suddenly, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Not hurried, not slow, just heavy and steady. A man appeared in the bedroom doorway. Tall, thin, rolled up shirt sleeves, dark khakis, slicked back hair, gaunt face. Victor. His eyes shifted past Liam and landed on Noah. He said nothing. Audrey turned. "Victor, this is Liam," she said, her voice noticeably softer. "My ex-husband." Victor gave a curt nod, cold, indifferent. "Hello." Liam nodded stiffly without warmth. He stood, placing a steady hand on Noah's shoulder. All 3 adults stood in the same room, yet none of them seemed to inhabit the same reality. "He's scared," Liam repeated, "and there's nothing you or I say that's going to change that." Victor raised an eyebrow. "He's a kid. Kids are scared of everything." Noah tightened his grip on his father's hand and for the first time gently tugged at his sleeve. "Dad, can we go home now?" Liam bent down, looked Noah in the eye. Just a moment. Then he turned to Audrey. "He's coming home with me tonight." "No," Audrey snapped. "You don't have custody. You don't have my permission." Liam didn't answer. Instead, he crouched down and lifted Noah into his arms. "Then let the court decide." Audrey stepped forward, blocking the way. "If you walk out of here with him, I'll call the police." Liam looked at her calmly. "Go ahead, but before they get here, you'll need to explain this." He raised Noah's wrist for her to see. The bruise was unmistakable. She said nothing. Victor remained at the doorway, still silent. Liam walked past them, holding his son close against his chest. Just before crossing the threshold, he stopped, but didn't look back. His voice was firm, resolute. From now on, he'll never have to hide under the bed again. Liam carried Noah down the stairs, each step creaking under the weight of his shoes on the wooden floor. The house remained uncomfortably silent. The fresh scent of floor cleaner lingered in the air, mixing with something more stifling, an invisible heaviness. The kind of silence that doesn't feel right, like the dense air left behind in a room where someone just screamed and now only emptiness remains. Noah nestled into his chest. The faded stuffed bunny was clutched tightly in his small arms. The living room wasn't large, but it was neatly arranged. A light-colored leather sofa, a coffee table with a vase of pure white flowers. The curtains were drawn halfway. On the bookshelf sat a few novels, some framed photos, but not a single one included Liam. Victor stood near the window, hands in his pockets. He didn't say a word, didn't even turn his head. Audrey sat down on the chair across from Liam, her legs crossed, red lips pressed together. Liam set Noah down beside him on the couch. The boy huddled into the corner, hugging a pillow and his bunny, eyes cast to the floor, barely daring to breathe. "We're going to my place tonight," Liam said. "Just for the night. It's his birthday. I have that right." Audrey let out a short laugh, sharp, like metal clinking against glass. "Right? Liam, you signed away your parental rights 3 years ago. Remember?" "I know," Liam replied, voice steady. "And I was wrong, but I'm not backing out this time." "You don't get to play Father of the Year just because you saw a bruise," Audrey said, narrowing her eyes. "I'm not letting you use your son as some kind of redemption project." Liam turned to Noah. "Do you want to come home with me tonight, son?" Noah looked up. He glanced at his dad, then at his mum. His lips quivered slightly. "Don't leave me here, Dad," he whispered, eyes filling with tears. "Please." Audrey shot to her feet. "Number. I'm not allowing this." Liam didn't move. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out his phone, and started dialing quickly. Audrey stared at him, eyes blazing. "What are you doing?" "Calling a lawyer," Liam replied without looking up. "Starting the process to file for an emergency protective order. I'm not letting him spend another night here." Victor turned his head, speaking for the first time. "Liam, don't blow this out of proportion." Liam looked up, his eyes sharp. "I'm doing what's right. I'm his father." "You're also the one who vanished for 3 years," Audrey cut in, her voice rising. "Do you have any idea how I've managed on my own? You disappeared, and now you come back acting like you never left, making demands and handing down judgments, like some kind of king." "I didn't come back to judge you," Liam said. "I came back because our son is hiding under a bed." Noah broke into tears. They came fast, raw, choked sobs that couldn't be held in. The boy folded into himself, burying his face in Liam's chest, his small body trembling in waves. The stuffed bear slipped from his hands and hit the floor. Liam set his phone down and wrapped his arms around his son, gently rubbing his back. "It's okay," he whispered. "Dad's here now." Audrey stood frozen, fists clenched tight. She turned away, for the first time, without a word. Victor avoided both their eyes. He stepped back, drifting toward the exit, like he wanted to disappear. No one spoke for nearly a full minute. Finally, Liam turned to Audrey, his voice low but steady. "You know this isn't right. You know he's not safe here. And if you won't admit it, I'll prove it." Audrey took one step forward, her hands slightly trembling. "You'll destroy me." "No," Liam interrupted. "I just want to save my son." The boy in his arms was still crying, but the sobs had quieted. slowed. Liam stood up and lifted Noah. The teddy bear still lay on the floor. He bent down, picked it up, and tucked it into his son's hands. Noah clutched it instinctively, then wrapped his arms around his father's neck. Liam stepped into the hallway, walking past Victor. Victor opened the door, said nothing. Outside, the last of the twilight had vanished. A cold wind swept across the front yard. Liam gently placed Noah in the back seat, buckled the seatbelt, closed the door. He climbed into the driver's seat and started the engine. Through the windshield, he saw Audrey standing on the porch. The coldness was gone. She stood there, arms wrapped around herself, like someone who had just lost something precious. Liam kept his eyes on the road ahead. "I'm not leaving you here again," he said, his hand resting softly on Noah's shoulder. The car pulled away, slowly, leaving behind the house that once was a home. In the rearview mirror, the soft glow of the living room faded into the distance. Liam's penthouse sat on the 32nd floor, overlooking the entire northern skyline of the city. It was a spacious, quiet place with soft motion sensor lighting, polished oak floors, and floor-to-ceiling glass that reflected the city lights like a living painting. But to a child who had cried himself to exhaustion, all that perfection was just a strange room. Noah sat curled up on the sofa, still clutching his old stuffed bunny as if it were the only familiar thing he had left. Liam brought him a simple bowl of noodles, the instant kind he used to eat during late-night work sessions. Noah ate slowly. He didn't say a word, but he finished every bite. No shouting, no harsh words, no strangers pounding at the door. And for the first time, in a very long time, the boy finished dinner without having to lower his head, without being locked in a room, without fear. Liam sat at the kitchen bar, not eating. He just watched Noah. Each spoonful the boy brought to his mouth seemed to carve deeper into the silence around him. Around 9 p.m., Noah drifted off on the sofa. He didn't ask for the lights to be turned off, didn't complain about being cold, didn't fuss. He slept as if his body had finally given itself permission to let go. Liam grabbed a light blanket and gently spread it over the boy. As his hand pulled the edge of the blanket up over Noah's shoulder, the child stirred slightly and nestled deeper into the pillow. One small hand still clutched the bunny's ear. The doorbell rang. Liam stood and walked briskly to the front door. Claire Harmon, Liam's legal advisor for nearly 10 years, was standing there. Charcoal trench coat, a briefcase in her left hand, her face sharp and composed. "Don't say a word," she began as she stepped inside. "I heard from your assistant that you brought your son home from your ex-wife's place and didn't return him per the custody agreement." "Because he was hiding under the bed," Liam replied, saying he was afraid of his mother. Claire stopped in the middle of the living room, noticing Noah asleep. Her eyes softened slightly, but her voice remained strictly professional. "Any visible injuries?" On his wrist, clear signs of restraint. "Do we have photos?" "I took some earlier. I also recorded the moment he cried and said, 'Dad, please don't leave me here.'" Claire sat down and opened her briefcase, placing her laptop on the glass coffee table. "Liam, I need you to understand something. If all we have are emotions and words, we're not going to win. The legal system doesn't rule on instincts. It rules on evidence." Liam sat across from her, hands clasped tightly. "I know," Claire typed quickly, her tone steady. "We'll need a medical report, witnesses, neighbors, or teachers. Proof, maybe video footage or a journal with documented entries, and ideally, a statement from a licensed psychologist." Liam leaned back in his chair, resting his chin on one hand. He looked toward Noah, then exhaled slowly. "There was a neighbor who once mentioned hearing screaming. I brushed it off at the time. And one of Noah's former teachers called me once, said my son wasn't like the other kids in class, but I never called her back. Claire jotted that down. We'll follow up. Do you remember the teacher's name? Miss Meyer, Meyer Lane, West Haven, North Elementary. Perfect. I'll submit a request for his school records first thing in the morning. Liam said nothing. He glanced over at Noah again. The boy was still asleep, clutching his stuffed bear like it was the only thing tethering him to safety. Claire followed Liam's gaze. You know something, she said, her voice gentler now. I once represented another father, a man who picked up his son in the middle of the night, just like you. That child didn't say a single word for 3 whole months. Not one. But at the final hearing, when the judge asked, "Who do you want to stay with?" that boy simply raised his hand and walked over to hug his father. Liam nodded slowly. He stood, walked over to the sofa, and sat down beside his son, careful not to wake him. His fingers gently pulled the edge of the blanket back into place. He brushed the soft, sweat-damp hair from the boy's forehead. Then he whispered, more to himself than to anyone else, "My son has forgotten how to smile." Claire said nothing, because sometimes the quietest words are the ones that echo the furthest. The next morning, the city hadn't fully awakened. Early light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long streaks across the cold wooden floor. Inside the quiet penthouse, the soft click of the coffee machine was the only sound that broke the stillness. Liam poured himself a cup, his eyes fixed on the sofa where Noah had slept the night before. The boy was awake. He didn't cry, didn't scream. He just sat up straight, clutching his stuffed rabbit, his tired eyes staring out the window as if waiting for the day to pass without having to be a part of it. "Are you hungry?" Liam asked from the kitchen, trying to keep his voice casual. Noah shook his head softly. Liam walked over and sat down in the chair across from him. The boy didn't shrink back, but he didn't move closer either. The distance was still there, but it wasn't the unbridgeable chasm it had been the night before. "I was thinking maybe today we could visit an old friend of mine," Liam said. "She's a doctor, but not the kind that gives shots. She just talks to people, helps them figure out the things that make them feel sad." Noah stayed silent. Liam gently added, "You wouldn't have to say anything if you didn't want to." "We'd just go, sit for a bit. I'll be right there with you." Noah looked down at his palms. A faint bluish mark was still visible on one of his wrists. Liam exhaled quietly. "Is there anything you want to tell me? Anything at all?" Noah bit his lip. Liam waited. He didn't push, didn't interrupt. Finally, the boy whispered so softly it was barely audible. "If I tell, she'll know." Liam's heart sank. He understood. A child's fear isn't always about getting hurt. It's the fear that no one will believe you. And when no one believes you, speaking up only makes everything worse. "Daddy won't let that happen," Liam said. "I'm here, and I believe in you." Noah didn't respond, but something shifted in his eyes. Not trust, not yet, but a path leading toward it. 10 a.m. Private clinic of Dr. Evelyn Walsh. The 5-story building had a modern design with plenty of greenery, frosted glass, and natural light. It didn't feel like a clinic or even a law office. It felt like a place where you could finally exhale. Liam walked in with Noah, whose small hand still clung tightly to the stuffed rabbit. "Miss Evelyn is very kind," Liam reassured him. "You can just sit and play, or draw. You don't have to talk unless you feel like it." The boy gave a faint nod. Evelyn Walsh, somewhere in her 50s, silver-streaked hair. A warm, gentle smile stepped out to greet them at the door. "Well, hello, you two," she said, her voice as soft as the morning breeze. "Noah, I hear you're quite the artist. I've got a brand new set of paints no one's ever used before. Would you like to try them?" Noah stole a glance at Liam, then gave a small nod. In the therapy room, Evelyn sat at a safe distance, not too close, not too far. On the table were sheets of blank paper, colored markers, and a small wooden dollhouse. Noah sat across from her, still clutching his stuffed bunny, though his eyes began to scan the toys in front of him. "You can draw anything you like," Evelyn said gently. "Or, if you'd prefer, you can use these dolls to show me what a day at home is like for you." Liam sat beside Noah, silent, his hands resting on his thighs. Noah said nothing for the first 10 minutes, but then, without a word, he reached for a black marker and began to draw a large rectangle in the center of the page. Then he drew something that looked like a person trapped inside it. Evelyn watched, without interrupting. When Noah finally set the marker down, she asked softly, "Who is this?" The boy answered in a quiet voice, "That's me." "And this one?" He pointed to the figure outside the door. "That's Mom." Evelyn paused for a few seconds, then gently asked, "How did it feel to be inside that box?" Noah's voice trembled as he replied, "She locked me in there when Uncle Victor came. I wasn't allowed to come out. I wasn't allowed to talk, not even cry. If I did," she said, "she'd keep the door closed even longer." Liam tilted his head slightly, his eyes growing misty, but he said nothing. Evelyn jotted a few notes, her voice warm and steady. "Thank you for telling me that. It was very brave of you." Noah remained quiet. That afternoon, in Evelyn's office, Liam sat alone while Noah was given some cookies in the waiting room. Evelyn handed over the summary report. The physical injuries aren't severe, but they couldn't have been self-inflicted. More importantly, the child's emotional responses are telling: withdrawn behavior, avoiding eye contact, fear when his mother is mentioned, and an intense discomfort with confined spaces. Clinical conclusion: classic signs of prolonged psychological abuse. Liam's hand tightened slightly. "We'll provide full written confirmation within 24 hours. "Thank you," he said. Evelyn looked at him, her gaze firm, but not unkind. "It's time you stopped feeling guilty and started being a father." Liam nodded. That night, penthouse. Noah ate a simple plate of spaghetti, quiet as ever. But he no longer trembled when Liam walked near, no longer flinched at the sound of a door closing. After dinner, he sat by the window with his coloring book. He was drawing a picture. There was a sky, some sunshine, and two figures, a man and a little boy, holding hands. Liam watched from a distance, then slowly approached. "What are you drawing?" he asked gently. Noah didn't look up, but his voice was clear. "Me and Daddy." Outside, no box. Liam sat down beside him. He didn't need to say anything, just sitting there, just being present. For the first time, he didn't feel like a man trying to become a father. He felt like a father who finally belonged. After dinner, Noah continued coloring at the small table by the window. He drew a simple scene: a bright sky, sunlight, and two people, one big, one small, holding hands. No house, no walls, no box. Liam came closer and asked softly, "What are you drawing?" Noah didn't raise his head. "Me and Daddy, outside, no box." Liam quietly sat down beside him. He said nothing for a moment. Then, the memories came rushing back. 3 years ago, he had walked away from that home. Work had consumed him. The marriage was strained, and Audrey always had the upper hand. When she threatened to fight for full custody, he stepped back. He convinced himself that financial support was enough, that one day Noah would understand. But he had been wrong. No one should have to hide under a bed, because the adults stayed silent. Liam looked at his son, For the first time, he said, "I'm sorry." Noah said nothing. He simply added another sun above the two figures, then slid the blue crayon toward Liam. "You keep drawing." Liam picked up the crayon and drew the horizon. The neighborhood where Audrey lived sat at the end of a quiet street gated, with clean sidewalks and neatly trimmed trees. But beneath that orderly exterior were things no one wanted to say out loud until someone finally had to ask. Claire Harmon stepped out of the car, walking alongside Detective Marcus Hale, a man she had worked with before on several child protection cases. Claire knocked on the first door, number 42. It was answered by Mr. Ben Carter, a man in his early 60s who lived alone, known for staying up late and often watching the street through his front window. "About Noah, right?" he asked, as soon as Audrey Langford's name came up. "I heard screaming a couple of times, around 11 p.m. Sounded like a child crying. But I figured maybe he was just acting up and got scolded by his mom." "Did you ever see the boy being hit?" Marcus asked. "Number, but there was one time I heard something being slammed, and then the lights went off right after. I wasn't sure what happened, so I didn't get involved." Claire nodded. "Have you seen anyone else coming in and out of that house regularly?" "Yes. A man, tall, thin, drove a black car. He usually came by on Thursday nights." They thanked Mr. Carter and moved on to the next house. Lara, a single mother of two, opened the door. At the mention of Noah's name, she immediately invited them in. "There was a time I saw the boy locked out in the backyard. It was raining. He stood against the wall, didn't cry, didn't call out to anyone. I asked Audrey about it, and she said, 'He lied. He needs to learn responsibility.' I don't know what really happened, but that boy didn't strike me as the troublemaking type." Claire wrote down every word. Marcus noted the exact time and began cross-checking it with school attendance records. "I do have one question," Claire said. "Have you ever seen Noah attend school regularly?" Lara shook her head. "Number. There were weeks when I didn't see him go to school at all, but every morning I saw Audrey driving out." Marcus checked the records. "He's missed 14 days in 2 months. No permission slips, no medical excuse." Finally, they knocked on apartment 38, the home of the Wong family. The father, a retired engineer, led them into the living room and showed them footage from the security camera out front. The image was grainy, but clear enough. A child in a grey hoodie, Noah was being dragged into the house by an adult. Noah struggled, his feet slipping across the concrete. A second later, the adult's arms swung and struck the boy's face. No sound, but the motion was unmistakable. Marcus copied the file. Claire opened her laptop and played the clip. That afternoon, in the penthouse, Liam sat watching the footage. He didn't speak, just stared at the image of his son being dragged like an object. Only after the video ended did he finally say something. His voice wasn't loud, and it didn't shake. It held only one thing, an icy finality. "I'm not fighting to get my son back. I'm saving him." Claire nodded. "And we're on the right track." Claire Harmon knocked on the first door at 9 a.m. Beside her stood Detective Marcus Hale, tall, lean, with a gaunt face but alert eyes. They stood in front of house number 42, the one directly across from Audrey's. An elderly man opened the door, squinting at them. "Are you Ben Carter?" Claire asked. "Yes," he replied, his voice raspy but steady. "This about the boy?" "Noah." Claire paused. "You've heard something?" He nodded. "A few times. I heard him crying late at night. Not the usual tantrum kind. It was a muffled cry, like he was trying to stay quiet, but couldn't." Marcus scribbled into his notebook. "Did you ever call it in?" Claire asked. "I live alone," he sighed. "I figured maybe he got into trouble for misbehaving. Told myself, it's probably nothing. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right." Claire nodded in thanks. They moved on to house number 40. A young woman opened the door, a baby bottle still in her hand. Her name was Lara, a single mother living with her 2 sons. When she heard Noah's name, she let out a long sigh. One time it was pouring rain, and I saw the boy standing out in Audrey's backyard, soaked to the bone. I called out, and Audrey yelled from the window, "He's being punished. He lied." "Did you ever see anyone else coming and going from that house?" Marcus asked. "Yes, a man. Skinny, dark hair. Didn't say much. Usually came by late at night. My kids said that whenever he showed up, Noah would disappear." They thanked Lara and continued to house number 38 home of the Wongs, known around the neighborhood for their meticulousness. Mr. Wong opened the door and led them into the living room, then pointed to a security monitor. "We keep footage for up to 3 weeks," he said. "Last week, something strange happened." The video began to play. The image was slightly blurry from misty rain, but the scene was unmistakable. Noah being dragged into the house by an adult. The boy's hands clung desperately to the gate. A second later, the adult's hand struck him across the face. There was no audio, but the motion was crystal clear. Claire didn't take her eyes off the screen. Marcus noted the timestamp and requested the original footage be extracted. Afternoon, Liam's penthouse. Claire opened her laptop and set it down on the coffee table in front of Liam. Marcus was there too. Noah was in his room, drawing. "You need to see this," Claire said. The video played. Liam didn't blink. When the slap happened, he leaned back slightly in his chair. No groan, no outburst, but his lips pressed together, his hand clenched into a fist. "This isn't about custody anymore," he said slowly. "I'm saving that boy." Claire closed the laptop and shut the lid. "I'll request an emergency court order, but we need Noah well enough to speak." Liam nodded. He stood up and walked toward his son's room. That evening, Noah sat on the carpet, drawing with his new crayons a house, a person, a sky. Liam sat at the dining table nearby, quietly watching, not interrupting. "You know, Dad," Noah began, still focused on his drawing, "every time Mom got mad, I tried to hold my breath." Liam froze. "She said if I disappointed you, you wouldn't come back. So I tried not to cry. But one time I cried in the closet and she knew. She got even madder." His voice trembled. "I don't know if I'm bad or just not good enough." Liam moved closer and sat down beside him. He didn't speak right away. He looked at the drawing, a child standing alone in front of a wall with bars. In the distance, a man stood under the sun. "Son," Liam said softly, "you didn't do anything wrong, and I didn't come back because you were good or bad. I came back because you're my son, that's it." Noah was silent for a moment. Then he whispered, "You're not leaving again, right?" Liam didn't answer with words. He simply pulled his son into his arms. And for the first time, Noah let him. Tomorrow, Claire would file the official motion. The police would get involved. But tonight, this was enough. A child had stopped holding his breath, and a father had finally learned how to stay. The grey sky draped over the city like a cloth waiting to cover a courtroom table. In Liam's penthouse, the soft footsteps of Noah echoed on the hardwood floor. Each one seemed to ask, "What's waiting for me tomorrow?" The living room glowed with warm, amber light. No more shouting, no more slamming doors or objects hurled across the room. Just the faint scent of cinnamon from a candle, the slow ticking of a wall clock, and something even more unfamiliar than silence. A feeling of safety. Noah sat on the carpet, holding a crayon. He didn't draw quickly, but neither did he hesitate. On the paper was a man carrying a small child as they stepped out of a pitch-black box. Above them, sunlight, brightness, a blue sky. He placed the drawing to the side, not offering it to anyone. Maybe he was still waiting for something, or maybe for the courage to hand it over. In the kitchen, Liam was speaking with Dr. Evelyn Wells, the child psychologist Claire had invited to assess Noah. Evelyn's voice was steady, but never cold. She said that, legally, Noah was old enough to be heard in the upcoming hearing, but emotionally, she wasn't sure it was the right thing to do. Noah has made progress, she said, but if he's forced to face Audrey directly or is pushed too hard with questions, he might shut down completely. Kids who've been through abuse often tend to blame themselves. They believe they deserved it. Liam nodded, his eyes fixed on the living room. He didn't respond, didn't argue, just tightened his grip around the rim of his glass. As soon as Evelyn left, Noah slowly walked over. He had overheard most of the conversation, even though they hadn't intended for him to. He stopped in front of Liam, his head lowered, voice barely audible. "If I talk, do you think Mum would stop being mad at me?" Liam froze. His eyes met his son's deep, carrying a sorrow no child should ever have to hold. He knelt down, reached out a hand not to pull him in, but to let Noah choose. "You don't have to prove anything to me," Liam said gently. "You're not responsible for what happened. None of it's your fault. But if you want to speak, if you feel ready, I'll be right there. I promise." Noah didn't answer, but for the first time, he leaned into Liam's chest, quiet. A soft lean, like a thank you, a lean that made the grown man pause in place. That evening, Liam received a call from Claire. "Audrey's attorney just filed a motion to terminate your temporary guardianship. We saw that coming." "Yeah, but they're also requesting that Noah not be allowed to leave the state even during summer break. They're applying pressure, getting ready to strike hard." Liam looked out of the window, where the city lights flickered quietly like candles enduring a long wind. He let out a long breath. "Do you think Noah should testify?" Claire was silent for a long moment, her eyes drifting toward the courthouse steps, visible through the frosted glass. Then, in a voice that was both careful and firm, she said, "If he's truly ready, then his voice might be the one no one can ignore. It won't just be testimony, it'll be truth. But if he's not, we don't push. We shield him, no matter what it costs." Liam nodded, quietly. He didn't say anything else, just ended the call with a soft, "Thank you." Then he turned and walked down the hall, his steps heavier with each inch closer to the door at the end. Noah's door. It was slightly ajar. A faint glow of late afternoon sunlight cut across the hallway carpet, slipping in through the open window of the boys' room. Liam stopped in the doorway. Inside, Noah was sitting cross-legged on the floor, a roll of tape beside him. His little fingers were carefully pressing the corners of a sheet of paper onto the closet door. His back was to the entrance. He hadn't noticed Liam yet. The man stood still, just watching for a moment. The soft rustle of tape. The tiny creak of the closet door as the boy adjusted the angle. A kind of quiet only children could create when they're focused, not scared, not trying to hide, but immersed in something that matters. Then Noah turned, and he froze. His wide, uncertain eyes locked onto Liam's. His finger still hovered near the paper, like he hadn't decided whether to let it go or tear it down. I wanted to give this to you," Noah said, his voice just above a whisper. He started peeling the paper down again, almost shyly, as if he'd changed his mind. But Liam stepped in gently and held out his hand. "Can I see?" The boy hesitated, then handed it over. Liam unfolded it slowly. It was the same drawing from before the one Noah had shown him a few days earlier. The picture that had made his chest ache. A man lifting a small child out of a box, light pouring in from above. But now, something was different. Down in the lower right corner, in shaky, pencil-written letters, barely straight but heartbreakingly deliberate, were 6 words. I want to stand in the light. Liam read them once, then again, and this time he felt them, like a quiet, personal vow from the boy who had once been afraid to speak. He looked at his son who was now standing, not hiding. Still nervous, yes, but his hands were at his sides, his eyes steady, his feet planted. Liam knelt down. He didn't say, I'm proud of you. He didn't need to. He just held the drawing to his chest and opened one arm out. Noah stepped forward, not rushed, not unsure, just walked into his father's embrace, and for a long moment, nothing else moved. Not the air, not the world, just a boy. And the man who had nearly missed his chance to witness this moment, but didn't. Liam had no words. He simply sat down beside his son, pulled him close, and held him like a piece of himself he'd once let go. In that moment, there was no courtroom, no attorneys, no looming threat from a powerful, distant mother. Just the two of them, one who had once been a father, and one who had never really been allowed to be a son. That night, Liam didn't sleep. He sat beside his child's bed, watching Noah sleep soundly, still clutching the worn-out teddy bear. His mind wandered back to 3 years ago, the day he left. For work, for pressure. Because he thought providing money was enough, because he was afraid to face his own failure as a father. He hadn't come back in time by then. Audrey had changed the locks, changed her number, even changed her status from married to raising a child alone. And he had accepted the silence, thinking he didn't deserve a voice. But tonight, watching that little boy rest after drawing something that cried out for light, Liam knew one thing for certain. Staying silent would be the greatest betrayal of all. And tomorrow, when the courtroom doors swing open, it won't just be a child who rises to speak. It will be a father, a man who found his way back to himself in the palm of that small, outstretched hand. Audrey sat in the waiting room without speaking, her fingers tightly twisting an old cream-colored handkerchief that had once belonged to her mother. The afternoon light seeped in through the tall glass windows, cool and unforgiving, casting a pale hue across her face, a face that had not known rest in days, perhaps weeks. She wasn't crying, she wasn't shaking, but something inside her had gone still. There was a look in her eyes that no amount of powder or posture could hide, something hollow and distant, like the memory of warmth that no longer reached the skin. 3 years ago, Liam had walked out the front door without a word. No letter, no fight, just absence. And, in his place, he left behind a child who cried for him night after night, screaming questions Audrey couldn't answer, sobbing into sheets that smelled less and less like a family. In the early days, she had tried. She had held Noah close, wrapped him in the softest blankets, and hummed lullabies through cracked lips, her voice hoarse from too many battles with grief, with loneliness, with the weight of days that never ended. But as time crawled on, exhaustion seeped into her bones. Victor wasn't a kind man. He believed in order, in silence, in obedience. And Audrey, worn thin by years of holding up everyone else's world, began to believe in that too. She stopped singing. She stopped explaining. She started speaking in commands, in clipped tones, in glances that said, "Not now," more often than, "I see you." Noah changed, became quieter, jumpier. His little shoulders tensed whenever footsteps approached. His drawings turned from color to shadow. And though Audrey had never struck him, never shouted, never locked a door, his eyes looked at her like she might. She had told herself, over and over, toughness is how a child survives. But somewhere along the line, that toughness had twisted into something colder, harder, something that even she didn't recognize anymore. And now Liam had returned, not with flowers, not with apologies, but with a clean haircut, a sharp-tailored suit, and a legal team that filed into the courthouse like they already knew the outcome. He brought with him a trembling child who clung to the edges of his coat, and a manila folder thick with documentation, school records, witness statements, doctor's notes, pages and pages of quiet accusations that screamed only one thing. She failed him. Controlling. Unfit. Neglectful. Audrey had skimmed the words, her lawyer reading them aloud in a neutral voice. But all she heard was the sound of Noah's small footsteps avoiding her room at night. The way he flinched when she reached for his backpack. The time he stopped calling her Mom and started calling her Audrey. This battle wasn't one she could guide anymore. It had slipped from her hands the moment her son chose silence over trust, and Liam returned to listen to it. The waiting room remained quiet. A distant hum of voices echoed from the hall beyond, followed by the heavy, deliberate creak of courtroom doors. Audrey straightened in her seat, smoothed the lines of her skirt, and folded the handkerchief once more between her palms. For the first time in years, she wasn't sure whether she was the villain in someone else's story, or just a woman too tired to fight for a role she no longer remembered how to play. Family courtroom number 3. The air was thick, stretched tight, like the last string of a violin about to snap. On the left sat Liam and his attorney Claire, dressed in a modest black suit, her gaze sharp and unflinching. On the right, Audrey sat beside Douglas Price, a seasoned lawyer, tall and composed, his thin-rimmed glasses like lines drawn across the unfolding drama. Claire began. Her voice was steady, unwavering, each word slicing cleanly through the room. Your Honor, my client has gathered irrefutable evidence photographs of Noah's injuries, medical and psychological reports from Dr. Evelyn Grant, surveillance footage from the house across the street, sworn statements from neighbors including Mr. Ben Carter and Ms. Lara Stone, and school records confirming Noah's repeated, unexcused absences. Every piece of this evidence points to a single truth. This child has been living in an unsafe environment. Claire didn't need to raise her voice. She pressed a key. A video played. On the screen, a grainy image appeared. A child being dragged across a yard, his hands scraping the ground, trying to hold on. The crying was faint, so soft it was nearly inaudible, yet there was something in that silence, something so stark, so hollow. It froze everyone in the courtroom. Douglas stepped forward, adjusted his glasses, and spoke with unhurried composure. Your Honor, these images do not clearly identify any adult faces, lack context, and most importantly, there are no direct witnesses to any act of violence. Children fall, children cry, and this child is experiencing severe emotional distress from the reappearance of a father who, for the past 3 years, hasn't sent even a single birthday gift. Audrey turned to look at Liam, her expression twisted in painful sarcasm. She stood up. I was the one raising that boy when he walked away. I was the one cooking meals, rocking him to sleep, getting through Christmas nights with no money and no one by our side. And where was he? Where was he when Noah cried out for his dad? I'm not perfect, I'll admit that. But I'm not a bad mother. Claire responded coolly. No one's calling you a bad mother, Audrey. But locking a child out in the middle of winter, leaving him in the rain, leaving bruises on his arm and fear in his heart, that's not how you teach a child to grow up. That's how you destroy a child's trust in the world. Douglas cut in, trying to steady Audrey's rising emotions. We don't deny there have been struggles. But, Your Honor, please consider this. This man, Mr. Liam Callahan, walked away when the family fell apart, and only came back when he realized he might lose. That is not the act of a devoted father. That is the reaction of a man who's lost control. Liam clenched his fists. He started to rise, then paused, not out of fear, but because something far greater was about to happen. Claire took a breath. "Your Honor, we have nothing further to add. If needed, Noah is ready to speak." The courtroom fell silent. Then the rear door creaked open. Noah walked in. His white dress shirt rose and fell, gently, with each breath. He held his stuffed bunny in one hand and met every gaze without flinching. His small shoes made a crisp, deliberate sound against the wooden floor, like a clean cut through the courtroom's thick tension. He stood between the two attorney tables. Didn't bow his head. Didn't cry. "I don't want my mum to get punished," Noah began, his voice a little shaky. "But I don't want to live in fear anymore either." He turned to Audrey. "I don't want to lie anymore. I don't want to hide in the bathroom every time Mum gets upset. I just want to laugh, to live without being afraid. That's all." Audrey looked like the blood had drained from her body. She didn't cry, but her eyes were wide, empty, like it was the first time in her life she truly heard her own child. Douglas lowered his head. Claire took a step back, nothing more to add. And Liam, the man who once walked away, sat there, eyes red, no longer fighting for custody. He was standing with a child, one brave enough to face this entire room, the past, even his own mother, just to say he wanted to live a life without shadows. The verdict hadn't been given yet, but the truth, unmistakably, had already spoken. That morning, the sky over Westbrook was blanketed in greyish-white clouds, as if the whole city were holding its breath. Liam received a text, just one line. "Meet me. Before you make me lose everything. Audrey." They agreed to meet at an old coffee shop just outside City Hall, the very place where they had first met, nearly 10 years ago. Audrey arrived first. She leaned into her chair, eyes avoiding contact, both hands wrapped tightly around her coffee cup, as if clinging to the last traces of warmth. Liam walked in. No greeting, no small talk. He just sat down across from her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Audrey finally broke the silence. "You know," she said, voice low, "I used to think I could be a mother. It's just that Noah isn't like me. He doesn't smile much, doesn't ask questions. He just looks at me like I'm a stranger." Liam looked at her, not angry, not pitying, just calm. "Because you never made him feel welcome. You kept him close, yes, but you were never really there with him." Audrey let out a bitter laugh, dry, hollow. "And you? You disappeared for 3 years and come back playing the hero. You have no idea what it was like, handling a child who wouldn't speak, wouldn't eat, woke up screaming in the middle of the night. I used to think, if you never came back, at least I could teach him how to forget you." Liam said nothing. He wasn't forgiving her, just understanding. "You were the one I believed was strong enough to do the right thing, but instead, you blamed a child." Audrey's shoulders dropped, as if she could no longer hold up the tough facade. "I didn't know how to love him like a real mother. And when Victor came along, at least he made me feel like I was worth loving. I thought if I could just choose a man, maybe that meant I wasn't such a bad mother after all." Liam stood up. "You had your choice. Now Noah deserves his." Audrey didn't look at him as he walked away, but a single drop of water fell from the corner of her eye onto the silver spoon. It might have been regret, it might have been loss, but it wasn't enough to save anything anymore. At court, a few hours later, the air inside the family courtroom was taut, almost brittle. Claire stood beside Liam, facing Audrey and her attorney Douglas Price. Audrey's face was sharp, composed, her expression giving away nothing of the morning's conversation. She had returned to her performance, playing the part of the grieving mother, falsely accused, the victim of a vengeful ex. Claire began. "We are submitting to the court photographs of injuries on Noah's arm and back, a written report by pediatrician Dr. Evelyn Cole, and a video recorded by a neighbor at 4:32 p.m., showing the child being pulled into the house with clear sounds of distress. In addition, we have statements from the child's teacher and 2 neighborhood witnesses who claim Noah was previously locked outside in the backyard." Douglas quickly countered, "Children fall. They get scraped up. That doesn't automatically prove intentional abuse. Furthermore, none of the witnesses saw my client commit any harmful act. And let me remind the court, Mr. Liam Prescott forfeited custody for 3 years. This child could easily be reacting to the emotional shock of his sudden reappearance." Claire didn't answer. She simply nodded toward Detective Marcus, who had just entered the courtroom holding a small USB drive. He handed it directly to the court clerk. The screen lit up. An audio clip played the faint sound of bar music, humming in the background. "That kid is just dead weight. I tell him what to do and he just keeps whining. He's only 7 and already acting like that. He's not going to turn out to be anything." It was Victor. Clear, contemptuous, unmistakable. Claire turned to Audrey, slowly. "Mrs. Langford, did you ever wonder who you were entrusting your son to? Or did you know exactly what he was and just didn't care?" Audrey bit her lip. Her face twitched. "You have no idea what I had to give up. I lost friends, my freedom, even Victor because of that kid. He never listens. He ruined me." The courtroom was stunned. Claire took a step back. No one spoke. Douglas couldn't save it. Everything was clear now. Noah, still seated at the back of the room, remained silent. But he had heard every word. Judge Quinn struck the gavel. "The temporary order of guardianship is hereby granted to Mr. Liam Prescott, effective immediately. The investigation into child abuse will be expanded. This court is adjourned." Liam embraced Noah. The boy looked up at his father, saying nothing, but his face showed relief. Not because they'd won, but because, for the first time, he wasn't being kept in a box anymore. As for Audrey, she walked out of the courtroom. No one called her name. No one reached for her. The mask had fallen. And the truth finally had been looked straight in the eye. That morning, the penthouse was filled with sunlight, the kind that wasn't filtered through thick panes of glass or hidden behind drawn curtains. Liam had opened every window. Fresh air, fresh wind, and something else just as new. A fresh start. Noah sat by the window, colored pencils scattered across the floor. He was drawing as usual, but this time not a picture of the box or the corner. This one had sunlight, trees, a man sitting and reading a book, with a little boy sleeping peacefully in his lap. Liam saw it. He stepped closer, leaned in gently from behind. "This is you and me." Noah didn't answer, but he smiled, for the first time. A real smile, not forced, not out of fear. Just a smile, because he wanted to. Dr. Evelyn visited that afternoon. She checked in on Noah's mental state, asked him a few questions. He didn't say much, but he handed her his drawings. Evelyn nodded. "He's beginning to open up. Emotional wounds don't disappear overnight, but what matters most is, from now on, no one's going to reopen them." Claire came by too, carrying a folder sealed in red, official, permanent guardianship papers. "Congratulations, Dad," she said. Liam took them, but didn't look at the documents. His eyes were fixed on his son, who was now playing with his stuffed rabbit. "I didn't become a father today," he said quietly. "I became one yesterday, when that boy chose to walk into that courtroom and tell the truth." Claire looked at him and gave a small nod. "And that little boy knew there was someone waiting just outside, ready to hold him. no matter what the verdict was. That evening, Liam made 2 cups of hot chocolate and set the smaller one beside Noah. The two sat on the balcony. The night was calm. No shouting, no flashing red lights, just the sound of the wind. Noah looked up and asked softly, "Dad, if one day I get scared again, would you be mad?" Liam gently pulled him close, his voice low and steady. "I don't need you to be brave every single day. I just need you to know, every time you're scared, you can still run to me." Noah nodded. Then, unexpectedly, he said, I want to redraw the picture of you holding me. But this time, I'll add Doctor, Evelyn, and Claire, and some light." Liam chuckled. "Anyone else going in the picture?" The boy thought for a moment. "Yes, the bunny, because he's afraid of the dark too, just like me." Night fell. Not an ending, just the beginning of a new day for a child who once lived locked inside fear, now learning to lift his head and look up at the sky. And for a father who once missed his chance, now standing exactly where he's meant to be, right beside his son.